you help to free us as we work to unbind these chains.
Hello, and welcome back. If you're here, thank you for returning. On our last episode, we spoke of shadow work. Today, we will bring up more possibilities of which you may locate in your search. And as moving forward, I may use terminology that you're not familiar with. So, firstly, let's become more familiar with the human mind. Sectors and duties, capacities, and even places of shadows. Understanding that will help us to understand ourselves. Occasionally, I will refer to analytical mind. Attention, memory, reasoning, and problem solving. The analytical part of the mind. Emotions of non-confront, avoidance, and fear belong to what we call the reactive mind. It is a mechanism that can override and short-circuit the analytical mind. The reactive mind is highly active in triggering the mechanisms associated to past traumas as a defense mechanism, often responsible for miscalculations. Both polarities can be found in the right hemisphere of the brain, both constructive and both that of shadow. Constructive aspects of the right hemisphere, we find nonverbal memory and spatial awareness. This is also where artistic emotion comes from, such as the ability to create music and connect with visual skills, such as painting, architectural design, and creative arts in general. And likewise, some of the mechanisms in the right hemisphere are active while dreaming. Moving forward, orientation, who we are, what our name is, how our relatives and friends are associated with us, and how we perceive them as personalities. And on the opposite end of the polarity, when this sector of the brain suffers from disorientation, we know this to be amnesia. So it is important that we exercise the muscles of our brain and to keep them in good communication. As we exercise their abilities, we become more apt to do better shadow work, better meditation, better focus, and overall, simply being better artists at living life in general. Oddly enough, it is the right hemisphere that controls the left side of the body. As we use both the left and the right side while we walk and conduct our everyday motor skills, they do work and function under a collaborated unison. Insight. This is the ability to locate and find what is causing our own problems and our own shadows. Another aspect, organization, such as connecting the dots to see the obvious for one's own conclusion or reality, instead of relying on an imposed reality by some authoritative figure. Meaning, the more data we consume, the better we can organize our own reality. By the act of searching and taking in knowledge and information, whether we agree with it or not, is the accumulation of data that expands the ability to create a better reality. Social communication, a disassociation with this sector, can be observed in people who cannot understand sarcasm, body language, and have general problems with communicating. A subject who lacks understanding and knowledge of social communication may be observed by giving too much one-way communication, constantly giving unsolicited information to another listener. And when it's time for listening, the subject may insist on interrupting and cutting the communication of the other, hampering a two-way communication, often causing confusion and the inability to have a rational, organized conversation of communication. Therefore, the subject with poor communication is suppressing his own expansion of reality and affinity with the universe around him. I will often also refer to the somatic mind. The somatic mind is in charge of regulating the pH in our blood, our heartbeat, when we breathe in and out, the equilibrium of the oxygen going to our bloodstream, calibrated from the heart and the lungs. The somatic mind is extremely advanced in its capacities, and we have no need to tell it to do anything. However, it has its way of speaking to us. When there is a problem in the psyche, it will often manifest through the usage of the somatic mind. Problems with health, diseases, manifesting sometimes through organ failure. As the somatic mind is also responsible for regulating the sugars through usages of substances, these also may manifest at disequilibrium, causing health problems. So what causes the reactive mind to trigger? What causes the somatic mind to manifest malfunctions? It is now the understanding of many in the field of quantum holistic mental health fields that both the reactive and the somatic mind are manifesting problems of traumatic events or simply lessons that are calling for help and attention through the only way it knows how to speak to you. And in the last episode, we touched on the importance of making decisions and how they affect our personal existential existence in our present time moving forward. And of course, some would agree, life must have quality in order for it to be worthwhile. So when we come to these junctures and we have a choice of doing something that feels good, a dopamine hit of some sort, or we have an opportunity to make a choice of improving our existential plane with a higher frequency. In the last episode, we also touched about how the conscious mind and the law of attraction actually have effect over the particles in our universe. That may sound to many like it needs to be filed into the quack folder. However, let's examine a few things said and studied by our own academic earth science. I'm sure we've all heard of the quarks and the protons, electrons, and how when they are consciously observed can change their behavior, unexplicable by science. You may have heard of the experiment of the particle of the proton, having the positive change to the negative and having another substrate of the same proton in a different part of the world, which will instantaneously mirror the change. Having a direct communication, the proton being able to be moved by the observer in scientific fields of experience as a repeatable action. This falls into the subject of wave-particle duality that you can do your own research on. According to earth science, in 1801, a British polymath by the name of Thomas Young began experimenting with the phenomenon of wave-particle duality, which, to the surprise of the scientists, photons and electrons' behavioral patterns are altered depending on their observations. In modern day, the most widely accepted theory regarding this comes from the physicist Niels Bohr, who proposed that particles like photons don't have definite properties until they are observed. Then again, another modern physicist, Richard Feynman, said regarding this same phenomenon, the double-slit experiment is absolutely impossible to explain in any classical way and has in it the heart of quantum mechanics. What is quantum mechanics? Quantum is the word we use for multi-dimensional. Our science is not yet at a multi-dimensional state. It could be said that we only observe the physical manifestations that we can observe. But what is projecting these physical manifestations, such as photons that can be moved and changed by a conscious observer? By contemplation of what is considered bizarre to our science and unexplainable, one may question, is our consciousness connected to creative source that projects our perception of reality? What if the data output was equal to the data input, and we are the projector of the data input in our universe? Would it be possible to scatter numerical values into our metaphysical plane just by conscious thought, and that those numerical values are interpreted by our brain as objects in the collective field of our existential plane? Some refer to this as the matrix, which is nothing more than a program designed. Is it possible we are fragments of source, and source itself, source being the originator of the program? Who is the higher self that we speak to during these theta states and the subliminal mind? Regardless of whether it is yet to be understood or not, this is the basic concept and principles of the law of mirrors, as the law of mirrors functions off of these observable facts that conscious moves particles in our universe. So, is it from a quack or is it from a quark? Quarks being the heart of photon light. And that brings us to our next exercise, which is actually an assist in pre-meditation. Why a pre-meditation exercise? If you have already done some of the shadow work exercises, now let's try doing the same again using a pre-meditative preparation. By using this preparation, we can calm the thoughts that we are projecting. We can calm the sensories that we are trading information with. And when we do this, we liberate energy that can be utilized to go deeper into the mind of shadow work. You may also find it useful to use frequencies and headphones in your quiet environment. And it is important to use frequencies that have the sum of 3, 6, 9, or 12. 432, for example. 4 plus 3, 7, plus 2, 9. That is a safe frequency. If the digits of your frequency can sum to 3, 6, 9, 12, then we are working with base 12 mathematics that exist in our quantum fields of subliminal conscious. To the contrary, frequencies that are outside of these geometric resonances can actually be destructive and inhibit your progress into the etheric realm, viewing what we often call the Akashic records. Not only necessary to do our shadow work, but also to go into viewings of Akashic records, where it contains past life experiences of our existential reality, which can help us understand in our present time why we have certain perceptions and, when necessary, be able to observe destructive patterns in our own thought processes and triggers located in our reactive mind. Our primary goal is a higher existential plane and personal manifestation of what we want. These episodes are meant to be viewed in a consequential sequence so that we can build a framework from the foundation moving forward. So if you haven't seen the first video, please go back and see that before we move on. Understand the exercises of the shadow work that we'll be conducting on ourselves. Please don't become overwhelmed and try to tackle all of your phrases at once. Tackle one phrase at a time, perhaps in a session. If you have the energy to continue with more phrases, as it is also not necessary to try to tackle various exercises in one session of meditation shadow work. So, choose your exercise, write down your notes, your phrases beforehand. So without further ado, let's get right to the pre-meditation preparation. The benefits of pre-preparation into a meditative state are multifaceted functions. As we go into shadow works, we will see that we will need to confront traumatic experiences, and sometimes that requires temporarily lowering our frequency into a traumatic event. So before doing that, let's be prepared to bounce back out and start with a high frequency and give us a reference point to return to before getting back to our daily activities. So part of the preparation of pre-meditation is to raise our frequencies in a high vibrational state. Yet another aspect of the preparation is to disconnect and tune out the noise of our everyday experience. This will clear the smoke off the field that we will be working with in order to see things more clearly. By doing so, we move closer to the theta state of where our subconscious can work with us, which is your higher self. Another aspect is installing divine protection around us. We don't want to leave ourselves vulnerable. Another important mechanism is being able to return to our present time when we are ready to exit our introspection. This requires that we simply write on a piece of paper our name, our birth date, the city we were born in, and feel free to add any personal information that will help you to reorient into the present time. Touch the items around you in your environment. Take a walk outside. Touch the trees. Look at the trees, the buildings, all the physical mass. We're coming back into the physical plane. So just small exercises that help bring us back in to present time. Also important is to consider what time of day we choose to do this introspection. A quiet time when things are less tumult in the exterior environment, via noise, thought, confusion, waves, pollution passing through our perception. The further away we can get away from that, the more potential we have while doing our shadow work. What we don't want is distractions. Cell phone on airplane mode and turn it off. It may be well to consider that as a daily routine before sleeping. And let's not forget to invoke our intentions into the universe through words, through your own form of prayer that you feel most comfortable with, and by writing it down on a paper and keeping that paper. Remember to observe that paper and giving thought, attention, and focus on that intention that you seek to experience. A moment of prolonged attention. Try not to let our thoughts drift off, always returning to the thought frequency of intent. And as we may reference this premeditative assist in our future shadow work sessions, let's create it on a separate video of its own so that you can just hit play and go right to it before every session of meditation. And let's handle the exercise that you feel is most pertinent to you at the moment and have your notes ready before moving on to the pre-assist. We'll see you soon.
He sits on a mountain top and watches the stars as they glisten, and he lends an ear to listen. For these bright beauties surely play a cosmic melody. what stays the same.